Oh, hello, hi, it's Tracy here from tracydanielstherapies.co.uk. So I've come on live today to talk to you about some of the worries and feelings that people may be having as we find ourselves coming out of lockdown. I'm in my conservatory, by the way, at the moment. Some of you who have been watching my videos will probably have noticed that I'm in a different location. Normally I like to do my little Facebook Lives in my study because I know I can normally hold a reasonable connection in there, but today I've come into my conservatory, so fingers crossed that we'll maintain a good internet connection in this room. If not, I'll switch back and just run over to the study and set it back up in the study. But the conservatory is actually my treatment room and I really like it. I came in here yesterday, it was just gorgeous. The sun was shining, it was lovely and warm, there was a real feeling of spring in the air, and it just made me feel so cheerful. And I just thought, it's so long now since I've actually seen clients face to face, and I'm really missing that. I love to see people face to face. I've been working with people on Zoom recently, and that's okay, but there's nothing like having that face-to-face dialogue with somebody, and I just love being in this room. It's got such a great vibe to it. I can look out my garden, and it's really nice at the moment because I can see all the daffodils and tulips coming up, and I know that it won't be long before they're all in full bloom, and that just makes me feel so happy and cheerful. So anyway, coming to today's little talk, so I was thinking about Monday. You know, a lot of us probably were quite eagerly awaiting to hear what the Prime Minister had to say about lockdown and the easing of the lockdown restrictions, and a lot of us were probably glued to the TV or the radio listening for that news. And now we know what's going to happen, roughly speaking, over the course of the next few months. So we've got this kind of roadmap, as they call it, for the easing of lockdown restrictions. Hi Wendy, hi. I always love it when people say hello. Sometimes I get a notification that says that somebody's watching me and sometimes I don't, but lovely to see you here watching me today. Yeah, so you know, feel free to say hi if you want to, or leave a comment in the comment box below, or send me an emoji, whatever. It's really nice to have that interaction with people. In fact, that's something that I miss. I miss seeing my clients and I miss having that interaction. So there we were, glued to the TV in my household anyway, waiting to hear what the news was about the lifting of restrictions. And, you know, at least we've got some sort of framework for the future, but it is a little bit vague in as much as we know that things might change. If the rate of infection goes up, then some of those restrictions might not be eased according to that timescale. We'll just have to see what happens. But I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about what I would do for my Facebook Live today, and I actually had something else in mind, and then something very curious happened. Obviously my brain had acknowledged that information, taken in that information on Monday evening, and Tuesday morning I woke up out of a dream, and it was really strange because I had two dreams, and it was just, it felt like two dreams. It felt like two separate dreams, or two sequences of events in these dreams. They were both quite different, and I woke up on Tuesday morning and this dream was really clear in my mind. It was really vivid, and I thought, gosh, I really am feeling quite anxious about lockdown and the restrictions being lifted, and I didn't even know that I was feeling anxious about it. I thought I was feeling quite okay about it, looking forward to doing the things that I want to do. But yeah, these dreams threw me, and I thought, that's it, I'm going to talk about this in my Facebook Live instead of the topic that I had planned. So one of my dreams was that I had, if you don't mind me sharing this with you, because I think you know, we all have dreams, don't we? And our dreams can give us insights into how we're actually feeling. And one of my dreams was about having a massage with my favourite massage therapist, who's very, very good. And I dreamt that I was there and I was in her cabin and I was having a lovely, relaxing massage, and we were chatting away as we do. And then I realised that I hadn't got a mask on, and I realised that she hadn't got a mask on, and all of a sudden I felt really fearful about the fact that the pair of us were so relaxed and happy, chatting away as we normally do, sort of girly talk, but not wearing masks. And so in the dream I sort of had to say, we need to be wearing masks, and that kind of changed everything. And then the dream kind of moved to this other situation where I was in a bookshop, like Waterstones. I love going to Waterstones. I love bookshops. I love the smell of books and bookstores. And I dreamt I was in Waterstones, But not just browsing around the shop. I was actually sat down at a table and I was looking at a book and browsing through this book. And a lady came up and she walked behind me, but she was standing quite close because she was kind of looking over my shoulder to see what it was that I was reading. And there were lots and lots of other people in the bookstore. It was really very, very busy. And I kind of looked up and I realised that this lady was very close to me. And I realised that the shop was very, very busy and quite crowded. And I felt nervous about it. So, you know, the combination of those two dreams made me realise that when I woke up that actually I am feeling quite anxious about social distancing and about the easing of the lockdown restrictions and life going back to normal and people being in close proximity with one another or being in crowded spaces. And it was all about, I guess, letting our guard down and what it feels like when we let our guard down. And I think it's quite curious, isn't it, when you think about it? You know, we've had almost a year now of life being so different. And, you know, we hear this phrase that's kind of thrown around, this new normal, as they talk about it, of, you know, social distancing, washing our hands frequently, wearing facial masks and so on. And we've got used to that. So in a way, because we've got used to that, the thought of going back to things as they were is quite daunting. Now, obviously, we won't go back to things as they were. I don't think things are going to, personally, I don't think that things are going to go back to normal for a very long time. But we know that the restrictions are going to be eased. So what's happened is we've kind of got used to this new normal. This new normal has become our way of living now. And our sort of brains, if you like, the way in which we think and feel, we've adapted to this. We've adapted to coronavirus and the way that we have to live our lives now. And so if we're going to come out of lockdown, we have to learn to adapt again to a new way of being. So going back to the old normal probably won't happen, but it will be an adjustment even so, if you know what I mean. So we know that these restrictions are going to be lifted in stages over the course of the next few months. And I wonder how you feel about that. As I said, I didn't realise that I felt quite as anxious as I obviously do. Do you feel anxious, or maybe you feel very frustrated at the moment? Maybe, you can't wait for everything to get back to normal, and you are, quite annoyed about how life has been so restricted and we haven't been able to have the freedoms that we used to enjoy. On the other hand, you might be extremely worried about the situation, and you might be experiencing a very high level of anxiety. I think that's possible for some people. I know some people who have been shielding for a long time are still experiencing a high level of anxiety about the easing of restrictions and what that will mean for them and their families. So there's a whole range of emotions that people might have. Relief is another thing that some people might be feeling. They might be feeling relieved that the restrictions have been lifted or will be lifted, and that they can get back to their normal working life. And obviously for somebody whose income has been impacted very negatively by coronavirus, that relief is going to be a very powerful and significant emotion. So I think, it's quite normal to have a very large range of emotions at this stage, because, we are still in a situation with lots and lots of unknowns. And as human beings, we don't like that, actually. Our brains don't like that. As human beings, the way in which we are wired is to have routines, to have structure to our lives. We like to know as far as possible what's going to happen in the future, and we like to stay within our sort of framework of normality. So we've all been through a lot of adjustment over the past year, and there's more adjustment to come. And there may be a mixture of emotions within your household. You may find that, you might be feeling a certain way, but you might find that your son or your daughter have different opinions and have different emotions and feelings about the situation. And you may find your partner has different feelings yet again. And there can be different emotions and different viewpoints across the generations. And it was interesting the other day that I heard that, you know, it's the younger generation that are feeling most impacted by lockdown, obviously, because for them, socialising, going out, seeing friends, going to parties, nightclubs, all the rest of it, it's very important at a young age to be able to do those fun activities. And so for them, it's been, you know, it's been particularly tough. But it's been tough for people of all generations. And some other young people that I've spoken to actually don't fit that kind of stereotype of young people. Some young people that I've spoken to actually have been feeling very anxious and very nervous about the coronavirus. So, you know, we can't generalise really. People across all age groups and walks of life can have very different outlooks and feelings about this situation. Now, something that I found very interesting, and I heard this only yesterday from a clinical psychologist called Richard Bentall, who is a professor of psychology, and he comes from my home city of Sheffield. So as soon as I heard him speaking, I was like, yes, he's from Sheffield, I have to listen to what he says. And he said, interestingly, that 60% of the population are actually highly, and have proven to be highly resilient mentally, in terms of coping with the situation regarding coronavirus. So, you know, some journalists and media people will talk about how there's this mental health epidemic, but in actual fact, he said no. He said as many as 60% of the population have proven themselves to be highly resilient in coping with coronavirus and the pandemic. However, 25%, and that's still a significant proportion of the population, 25% of the population have experienced or have been experiencing and still are experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. So that is perfectly normal. So if you find yourself experiencing some of those feelings, feeling low, feeling anxious, feeling very worried, you're not alone. You know, 25% of the population, as I say, is a big number. And then we know that a significant number of the population are other people that are already have ongoing mental health issues, and they're kind of going through that anyway. And then he said, interestingly, that 10% of the population are actually doing well and are actually doing better because of lockdown and the coronavirus. Now, isn't that curious? So, you know, it's really interesting to be aware that this whole situation, this pandemic, has affected different people in different ways. And in fact, some people who suffer badly with social anxiety, people who don't like socialising, don't like going out, find that difficult and stressful, have probably found lockdown and this kind of restricted lifestyle that we've lived quite easy to cope with. Because it suits them, it suits their personality and it suits their way of being. So, you know, we're all different. So, you know, there's a lot of talk at the moment about how it's so important that we all stick together and that we all follow the government guidance. And obviously it is, because the more that we can work together as a population and follow the guidance, then the better, more likely we are to be able to see the infection rate drop and to start to see the restrictions being eased and get back to a normal lifestyle. And when I got out of bed yesterday in the morning, having had that dream, I just thought, right, I've got all these thoughts in my head, I'm going to write them down, which is what I did. And I made a note of how I was feeling about the situation. And I thought, well, how am I feeling? I know that actually there's lots of things that I'm looking forward to doing again. I'm looking forward to exercising outside of the home. I'm looking forward to going to the gym, which I really enjoy, exercise classes, which I really enjoy doing. I'm looking forward to all of those activities. I'm looking forward to meeting my friends, going out for coffee, all of those lovely things. I'm especially looking forward to going to the hairdressers rather, and having my hair cut and, you know, just normal life again. And yet at the same time, well, I know consciously that I am looking forward to all of those wonderful things. I also realise that subconsciously, as my dreams have shown me, I've got some concerns, and I think I am not alone in that. I think that's the way that most of us are feeling. We're looking forward to getting back into normality, but we're also a little bit wary. And the other thing that happened, interestingly, the other day, I was in Tesco and I was shopping, and it was so busy. It was on a Sunday. I don't normally shop on Sundays, but I had to because we'd run out of just about everything. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to have to go. And there I was going around the shop, and I noticed that there was a man, and his mask had obviously slipped or didn't fit his face properly, and it was covering his mouth, but it wasn't covering his nose, so his nose was sticking out. And it was curious because everybody around me were kind of keeping their distance from him, and I did the same. I thought, really, I ought to go up to him and just say, I think your mask has slipped. But then I thought, do I want to get that close when his mask has slipped? So that, it's really fascinating to be aware of our own reactions to these situations. Obviously it just slipped. Later on he'd obviously pulled it back up on his face. Most people obviously are adhering to the rules and trying to do the best that they can. And sometimes things go wrong, don't they? People might forget to put their mask on, or a mask might slip. And we can feel anxious about that. We can feel worried about that. How life has changed. Over a year ago, we weren't wearing masks. We just went to the supermarket and did our shopping. We weren't bothered what other people were doing or feeling. It didn't have an impact on us. But as human beings, our brains are wired for survival, and what that means is that if we feel that there's a threat or a danger of any kind, our brains will start to, very quickly we'll notice that. And as I say, I noticed the people around me became very aware of this man whose mask had slipped, and they were all sort of giving him a lot of space because they didn't want to get too close to him. And that's because our brains are wired to ensure our survival, and that survival mechanism is there to protect us from danger. But it can lead us to becoming a little bit hypervigilant. And sometimes I look at some of the posts on Facebook, for example, where people can get very hypercritical of other people and other people's activities. And I think it's because of this hypervigilance that we've now developed because of the coronavirus. And it's perfectly understandable, but sometimes it can actually make us feel worse, especially if we read the negative comments that other people are writing on social media platforms. It can actually make our own anxiety, our own worries feel much worse. So, we have to be careful of what we expose ourselves to. And I've written about this and talked about this before, about how negative news, hanging around with negative people, can actually make us feel more anxious, more worried, more stressed and more upset. And if we're already feeling like that, it really is a good idea to avoid exposure to those sorts of things. So our brains like familiarity, and we've become familiar with social distancing, we've become familiar with wearing masks. And so we need to be, but we might actually find it quite difficult when the time comes to let go of some of those things, because those things now have become a little bit like a security blanket that we wrap around ourselves. They make us feel safe, and when we don't need them, I don't know when that time will be, it could be a long time yet to come, but when the time does come and we don't need those things, how are we going to feel about letting them go? Some of us will let go of our masks and these things easily. Others might find it very difficult to let go of those things. So change is difficult for us as human beings. We've adapted to this new normal, but then adapting to the changes that will occur over the next few months might be quite challenging. So what can we do about it? I've just made some notes actually, because there's a whole range of things that we can do about it. Well, first of all, try not to judge your feelings. So, I didn't judge myself for having that dream. It made me aware of my feelings, made me aware that I was feeling a bit anxious about the restrictions being lifted, but I don't judge it. I acknowledge that those are my feelings, and that's perfectly okay to have those feelings. It's perfectly normal. So don't judge your feelings. And if you're having a bad day and you're feeling particularly upset or annoyed or anxious or worried, just notice those feelings and just say, okay, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what's bothering me. But then try to move on from that. Try not to stay with that feeling. Sometimes it can actually help to write down what your feelings are. Personally, I like to journal, and I do that occasionally from time to time when I feel the need. And I might write down how I'm feeling. And it might help you to write down how you're feeling. And if you have a negative thought, perhaps write it down, but then see if you can counteract that negative thought with 2 or even 3 more positive thoughts. So it might be, although I'm feeling a bit anxious about these restrictions being lifted, what are the benefits to me? What are the benefits to my family? How will that make me feel? Will it make me feel happy to be doing certain things again that I haven't been able to do all this time? And could you, start to notice those feelings? Perhaps just think about, imagine those feelings, how happy you might feel to be able to perhaps meet a friend and sit on a bench and share a coffee together, or how positive and happy you might feel to go out with your family and be able to sit out in the garden of a pub and enjoy a drink together and have a change of scene. So instead of worrying and looking at things always from the negative point of view, the worst case scenario, which is what our emotional minds will always take us to the worst case scenario, try to see if you can change your perspective a little bit and see if you can think about or imagine how it would be to look at things from the best case scenario, the good things, the positive aspects of living. So, as a hypnotherapist, that's very much what I'm concerned about helping my clients to rewire their brains and reframe their thinking from a negative or self-destructive, anxious way of thinking to something that is much more positive. I can't see who's giving me the thumbs up, but thank you so much. It's nice to have some feedback on here. Thank you. So, it will feel a bit strange to be doing things that we haven't done for such a long time. So ease yourself into that gradually. And, as I say, acknowledge your feelings and work with your feelings. If you're feeling you're having a bad day and you don't feel like you want to go out or expose yourself to other people or social situations, then don't do that. Wait until you're feeling a bit more uplifted or a bit more energetic, or you're having a positive day. I know if I don't get enough sleep, then I don't want to put myself in a difficult situation. Whereas if I'm feeling rested and calm, then I will put myself into more challenging situations. Hi Mavis, hi, nice to see you on here. Lovely to see you. So, it's really important to just work with your own feelings. Don't push yourself too much out of your comfort zone, but you might have to push yourself a little bit in order to move things forward. So take things at a pace that feels comfortable for you, and don't dive straight in at the deep end if you don't feel that you're ready to do that. Do what feels right for you and for your family. And I always say to people, try to take things one day at a time. And I know that sounds a bit of a cliche, but really that's all we can do. And I think a lot of us have learned to do that, with coronavirus, with this pandemic. We've learned that unfortunately, we can't plan ahead too much because there's still lots of unknowns. Fortunately, things are looking a lot better now with the vaccination programme, but certainly for a long period of time there's been lots of unknowns. So planning ahead is quite difficult. So if it suits you to take things just steady and slowly, one day at a time, then do that. That's absolutely fine. Work at your own pace. And as you do take things one day at a time, try to focus on the good things. Perhaps at the end of the day, as you're lying in bed before you're about to drop off to sleep, you could either write down in your journal or notebook or just think it in your mind, what's been good today? What's gone well? What's been positive? And bring your attention to that. Because when we focus on the good and the positive things in our lives, that is what will expand in our mind, rather than the negative thoughts that make us feel more anxious, more fearful, more cautious and upset. And do try not to judge other people who get it wrong. There are always people who will do things that they shouldn't do, always. And there are always people who will make mistakes and get things wrong. But that still is nevertheless a small proportion of the population, and take comfort from the fact that the vast majority of the population are adhering to the government guidelines, doing the right thing, looking after themselves and their families, and that's what's going to get us through. So focus your attention on that as much as you possibly can. And if you have suffered, and some people suffered terribly, as some people suffered severe illness during this pandemic. Some people have even suffered the loss of a loved one, or they know of people who have suffered family loss. And if you're in that situation, then you're going through a bereavement process, and it is a process. And if you're feeling very low, and if you have been feeling very low or very anxious for more than 2 or 3 months, you really ought to seek medical help, seek professional help, and talk to your GP about that, because the longer these symptoms are left untreated, and I'm talking about symptoms of severe anxiety, I'm not just talking about low mood or severe depression, then you do need to get some medical support for that, because the longer symptoms are left untreated, the more severe these problems can become. So don't neglect your health. And it's interesting that I heard the other day on the radio somebody talking about how, in a way, as a nation, we are suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And that might be so. I don't know about that 100%. As I said, apparently 60% of the population are doing very well, but there may be a small number of people who are suffering from PTSD, and again, that requires professional help. There is no right answer to any of this, unfortunately. I don't have the answers, and I don't think anybody does. I think, as a nation, as a population, we are muddling our way through, and we're all doing the best that we can. We need to support one another and help each other through this. So there is no magic solution. I only know from my experience as a hypnotherapist and as a mindfulness teacher, I know what helps me, I know what helps most of my clients, and that's why I'm doing this live today, to talk to you about some of the strategies that you can bring into your family life, or your everyday life, your personal life, to help you. So yeah, there's no easy right answer. As for children, obviously we're aware that children have suffered quite a lot in so many ways, and it is on the whole pretty good that they're going to be going back to school on the 8th of March. I'm not going to talk about children here today because that is a separate issue. I did do a Facebook video, and that should be on my main page, because I saved it on there. So I did a Facebook video last year about helping children cope with anxiety, about lockdown and these issues. So that's there if you want to look at it, and I might update it in due course, because the whole issue of children, I think, it should be kept as a separate issue